All right, that's loud.
Adam Martin Casey.
Adam Martin Casey.
Kevin Michael.
I'll be
Casey.
Michael.
All right, good morning. This is Tyler with Downtown Rescue Mission, and we are recording another episode of Mission Hope with Kevin Mays and Adam Casey, a couple on our ministry team. And today we have a pretty exciting topic, I think, and Kevin's got the topic. So
Yeah, so we last week we were just kind of getting an idea, or last video getting an idea of what we do and kind of running through that. I think for today, what we were wanting to talk about is a topic that I think is really important when our clients come in. One is that we were created in the image of God, and that God created the world good, but then to understand with that we were born sinners. And so I think sometimes our guys come in and and girls come in and they don't have an understanding of both of those realities, and maybe one or the other is taking over. And so we want to make sure that our clients understand both. And so I guess my question, Adam, why is that so important? Like, why is that so important because that's foundational, right? I mean, that's walking in the gate. To understand that you're a sinner, you gotta know the problem to understand the solution. But I think it's more than that. I think it's more than just understand the problem. I think we got to even go back to creation before we even get to the problem. So
I think you have to understand what the word good means.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that,
And who decides what good is?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
It would be the Creator of all things that decides what is good. So it's not how I feel, think, or believe, but what does the one who created all things decide as good and right and true? And anything that he says or does is good because he is the one who defines what good is. And so for our residents coming in who may look at a world that has been clouded with sin and abuse and sadness, sorrow, loss, death, for them to understand God did create the world. He, in Genesis, starts it off that everything he created was good. And then there was one voice speaking goodness and life and truth, and Adam and Eve began to listen to a second voice that was introduced. And when they did, they stopped hearing the voice of God and began to hear an alternate voice. And from the time of the fall, Genesis 6:5, that says man's heart was inclined only toward wickedness, and this is a result of disobedience to God. Now their heart has fallen and has a virus, a sickness like a cancer. And so I would say to understand that we did that. We stepped into a place of disobedience, and now the heart was affected by that. Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked, beyond cure. Who can understand it? And so now we are governed by a heart that cannot see right because it is inclined only toward wickedness, that cannot hear truth and speak unless God enlightens and removes that heart of stone, Ezekiel 36. And so our clients have to understand what they are being reconciled to and why they need reconciliation. So God made everything good, and it is good. The land is good. All of the things are good. We talk about alcohol, marijuana. Women are not bad. I am. And so I don't avoid those things because they are bad. I avoid them because I am, and my heart is inclined towards sin and wickedness in those things until God intervenes and removes my heart of stone, replaces it with a heart of flesh.
Yeah, I think, like, thinking about what is good, I think of Colossians 1:16 that says we were created by him and for him. Mm-hmm. And so you start to think that's the good purpose, that is ultimately what we were created for, to live for God's glory. But I think for us, especially as sinners, that doesn't sound as appealing or joy, fulfilling our joy. But like we were talking about the other day in our discipleship group, when we were reading through the book of John and came to chapter 15, and you see that Jesus says that I want you to obey my commandments. Why? That your joy would be full. And so there's this unique thing in the good creation at the beginning, that not only is it to live for God's glory, but it's also living for God's glory is for our good and for the fulfillment of our joy, completion of our joy. But because of sin, that distorts that. And so I think that's really, really important when we're talking about the gospel, and especially as guys come in, they're trying to understand addiction, they're trying to understand their problems. and two, and we'll get to this in a minute, but they're trying to understand being molested as a child, or being physically abused, or
losing a father or mother.
and so they're looking at this broken, distorted world, and they're saying, how could a good God make a world like this?
Right.
How could He intend for the world to look like this? And what we find is that God's intention, God's creation, now He does allow, obviously He's sovereign over all, but God's creation was good, and every day He said it was good when He created the world. So I think it's really important to focus on with them, so that they see that this is the world that God created, but this is also the world that man, in his sin, through Adam, has contaminated.
Yeah.
And so that they can see God is good, and God is actually about our joy. It just comes in a way that is unique to us, and living for His glory, and that being fulfilled. So I guess we've already talked about the creation and what is good and what does that look like, living for God's glory. Second part of that is that we're born sinners, and why is that so important?
I want to go back for a second to kind of what you were saying, and then tie into that.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about folks who are coming into this program for however many years, or anybody really, don't have to be in the life recovery program.
Yeah.
We all have our sin, I guess, is a way that I would put it. But these people for so long were getting joy from whatever their vice was. You know what I mean? So when you say that following God fills that that joy and that joyfulness, you almost have to teach somebody to go from getting joy from, let's just call it alcohol, and that's what was filling there, to how can I lead a life where that is filled.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But instead of filling it with alcohol or XYZ, I'm filling it with Christ. I'm filling it with the gospel. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and that's a tough mold. That's got to be a tough mold to break.
I heard there was a quote that said that an idol is really a slave trader posing as an abolitionist, and that's why we don't get complete joy in drugs or alcohol. It's because we're looking for that joy, and we might get fleeting pleasure, we might get temporary joy, but it's not lasting, it's not complete. And only in Christ, and only doing what He created us to do, coming to that reality and that purpose of what He's created us to do, can we find joy. That is Colossians 1:16. It was by Him, or through Him and for Him, that we were created. And so we have to look to our Creator to understand and to feel the fulfillment that we're all looking. Everybody. That's the truth. Every single human being in the world is looking for fulfillment. It just depends on, do we look in the right way? And there's a way that seems right to man, but leads to destruction. And so many of us run to idols only to be disappointed over and time again, which has brought them here. And so what we can point them to is, hey, God created you for a purpose. He created you for His glory, and He created you not only for His glory, but this is also for your good and for your complete joy.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys this. Mm-hmm. When in the program, generally speaking, do you see people kind of take that turn, where that kind of clicks? Is it in Matthew, in the first 3 months, where's that?
That's a good question. I would say it depends on the person. I've seen it really. What do you think?
I would say it depends on the Lord. We've had people. Very, very truly, we see people who are blind. They are deceived by their heart that is deceitful, that is born inclined toward wickedness, and so cannot see truth. And we have had people come in, and day one, they hear the gospel, they respond because the Spirit of God has opened their eyes to see. We have people who make it all the way till graduation day, and all of a sudden they're broken by seeing other people who have changed and say, I want that, and God reveals Himself to them even at graduation day. We have one right now who in the program, who was in the program twice, left, and on the street God just opened his heart and his eyes to see, and he said, this is not who I want to be. I need to know this God that they were talking about. Right. Came to faith in the streets, and now has come back into the program and says, I need to know this God.
I was at Waffle House this week, and ran into a guy, came up, shook my hand. It was a guy that's been in the program, hasn't been in the program for 5 years, and came to me and said, man, I've just, this stuff is starting to make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, and things that we have invested in, 5 years ago
Yeah.
are now coming to light. And so I think you're absolutely right. It's up to the Lord.
Yeah.
It's His divine providential hand that's going to open the eyes,
Yeah.
and we just continue to have to swing for the fences and know that He's going to float one over the fence. You know what I mean? Because it's His, by His grace, that things are going to happen. So,
This program is not the solution. This
Yeah.
program does not help anybody, but it can point to the one who can.
Right.
And so the goal of the program is not to reach sobriety, to get a house, to get a job. Those are great things, and when they come, we rejoice in what God is doing in somebody's life.
Right.
But
Just
the
preach
goal
Christ and
is
Him crucified.
preach the gospel and let Christ do the work in the heart. So again, the program is not the solution. The Christ of the program is the solution. And so that's
Right.
what we're pointing people toward, whether they're here or whether they leave. And we still keep in touch with so many who have come and gone, whether they left on good terms or bad terms, just to see, hey, do you know the Lord? Has He spoken to you? Has He shown and revealed Himself? So
I think that's one of the really cool things about this program is that, you get to know the guy and you kind of disciple them, but then you guys also still have communication and with them. And like you said, even if they leave for whatever reason, really, the chances are if somebody comes from our emergency shelter, leaves the program, you're going to see them again.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe not on the program side, but on the emergency shelter side.
somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, and then being able to kind of follow up and see that. And then people having the opportunity to go back into the program, like you said, and say, well, let me give that another shot because we don't know, who are we to say no, yes or no, I guess, because we don't know when God's going to do His thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I think it just depends on the Lord, however He's going to work it out.
Right.
I think the second part of our question now,
Sorry, I was supposed to loop back into
no,
that.
that's fine. That's
Okay.
fine. So they were created in the image of God. They were created for His glory. But now they can look around and they can see that that's not happening. And obviously maybe things, not only have they done, have sinned, but that people have sinned against them, and so they're feeling the brokenness and distortion of the world.
Yeah.
Not only that, but we can maybe pull this thread. I'm not sure if we want to or not, but maybe they feel like they were born a certain way, and so maybe they feel this propensity to a certain sin or to a certain thing, and so when maybe they've heard in the church, well, you weren't born that way, which seems to contradict the scriptures that says that you were by nature a child of wrath in Ephesians 2, or that that you were born into sin, and that you were dead in your trespasses, and following the course of this world and following the ruler of darkness. And so why is it so important to understand that okay, first we got to get creation out of the way. We got to get an understanding of God's goodness and the fact that we were created for His glory. But now we got to understand that we are all sinners, broken, and what do you think? Why is that so important?
Oh.
I know that's
a big one. Yeah,
There's a lot of
big
things to unravel. I
enjoy
think
that.
that should be for another podcast on some of those issues.
And maybe, yeah.
That might be for another.
I think so.
Well, when I think
discussion.
about that, I think about the person who was whose mother and father were, were maybe okay. Let's go back to it. Maybe they had addiction issues, and so that you're brought up in that environment. The environment kind of shapes who you are. I don't even know if we would say that, but it's true. Environment kind of has a lot to do with it. If your parents were addicts, the likelihood that you're going to be an addict when you grow up is extremely high. And I'll say this: that question, or the answer to that question, that when it hits you that we're all broken and we're all sinners, that's that doesn't, it's not light. I mean, that's heavy when
Yeah.
it hits you. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's so true about the fact that, when a father or mother, struggles with addiction, really they're struggling with idolatry. And when you look at the Ten Commandments, you have a positive promise, and then if you honor your father and mother, but then you also have a really negative promise and a warning with idolatry.
Right.
And it's a warning that, hey, this is going to follow for generations. And because you're learning to worship a little g God.
Right.
And you're learning that from your parents. You're learning that from your mom. You're learning from your dad. You're learning that from your uncle or aunt or whoever is raising you. And so I would definitely say that that we are molded by our environment. And especially those who are sitting around us.
I'll also say it's kind of takes a load off when you understand that this is totally by nature and there's almost nothing you can do to it, and that almost in a way forces you or to look up to God and say, like, okay, this is all right, this is you, got to follow you. And it's no longer you're a sinner, but you were born that way. Maybe it's not 100% your fault. You're into this nature, but then you make the decision where God reveals himself to you and you start to follow him, and then it kind of goes away.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you were born in that state because of the sin of Adam.
Right.
But you are responsible because you are you are pulled enjoying it. I mean, that is the complexity.
You have an inclination for it yourself. And the trick, I think, is for anybody counseling, anybody trying to reach out and help somebody struggling with that, the question is going to come up. Yes, God made everything good. Yes, man screwed it up. Why then does God, who is capable of anything, not just fix it? Why not just not give any problems? Why not just remove any kind of terrible crime, any kind of terrible wrong being done? And why does he not do that? And I think a terrible disservice is to just say, well, just because man is evil and now it's on him. Because I had somebody in my office just a year or two ago who said that. He said, if God gives that free will, if God just gives man all that ability, and that's why bad things happen, why did he honor the people, my aunt and uncle, who held me down and injected heroin into my arms at 8 years old, and not my will, my freedom of will? Why did he only respect the wicked free will? That's a good question that needs answering. And so for us,
we need another podcast for that.
That's a whole. That's
I know.
like
we can answer that question pretty simply just by pulling out the sovereignty of God and his word. But that's the answer to this question as well. Like, what's the reconciliation for those who are broken? It's understanding God's sovereignty and resting in his control. He's given you the understanding. He's removed your deceitful heart and given you a heart that is not void of sin, but now is aware and no longer deceived by sin. And so the difference in the Christian and the non-Christian is not one sins and one doesn't. It's that both of them, when they see sin, now they are aware that it is sin, when before they couldn't turn from it.
Yeah, I think, and I think Tyler is absolutely right. Understanding that and understanding how big the problem is. I mean, I think of Romans 3, you know what I mean? And you understand how big the problem is. The only thing you have to do when you understand that is to give up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it is like Jesus in Luke 18 where he's talking to the rich young ruler and he says, he said it's easier for a rich man or a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. And the crowd shouts, well, then who can be saved?
He says it's impossible.
He says it's impossible. Yeah. And I think a lot of times we focus on what is possible with God, and we don't focus on that he says it is impossible with man.
Right.
Despair had to come.
Having said that causes us to look up and look to Christ and say, I can't do this on my own. I can't do enough good deeds. I can't do enough. I think of this happened here. We had a client, big, like devil tattooed on his chest. Came in with neck tattoos. I mean, just hardcore. Did not believe in God. Did not want to believe in God. And I think of he was reading through the book of Romans. I don't know why he was given a chance, other than the fact that God, through his wonderful grace, was leading him there. He was in the classroom down here in this area.
Oh.
And he said it just came to him as he was reading through Romans 3
Yeah.
that chapter was talking about him.
Yeah.
And he literally runs down the hall, comes in my office with tears in his eyes, and he said, I'm a sinner, and I can't do anything about it. And so immediately, I think the Holy Spirit had convicted him of righteousness and of sin and of judgment. And then what was so beautiful is as his eyes were open to the fact that he was a sinner and he was born a sinner, I was able to apply the gospel and to show him that, hey, yeah, you are a sinner, and no, you can't do anything about it. But by God's grace, Christ has.
Right.
And so I was able to unpack the gospel to him. And so, yeah, I think it's important. Now, I think all of that can only come, and you said it earlier, it can only come through the understanding, the Holy Spirit opening those eyes, and so it comes to but we have to be very intentional because it's our responsibility to preach the gospel, continue to articulate that and to package it in the way that it needs to be, and really secure our doctrine.
Right.
I mean?
And Paul says we're to be ministers of reconciliation, and what is it we're reconciling people to? It's not sobriety. It's not to the things that they come thinking they need. The reconciliation is back to God, who made everything good and desires that they be good. Be holy as the Father is holy. And so our job is to reconcile them to this God who they've run from, they've been an enemy of, and who we've been an enemy of. And so now we know the way back. And Jesus, when we say, I don't know the way, how can I know? Don't even know where you're going. That's what the disciples say. And Jesus said, I am the way. Yeah. I am the truth and the life. And so us to be ministers of reconciliation is just to point them to the way back, and that is Christ.
I tell you what, since we've gone pretty long on this one, but for the next time, let's plan to do one on born this way, question mark.
I think that's good.
And maybe talk about one, the sin that has happened to the individual, has happened to us, but then also maybe the second part of that is the sin that's inside of us that we feel, and to maybe talk about that, pull that thread of, what does that look like, and what are we saying when we say that you are born, by nature you are a child of wrath?
Right.
What does that look like? What does that mean?
Yeah.
That's going to be an interesting topic.
Yeah.
You might have to go 25 minutes for that topic.
Yeah.
Which I think is a pretty good amount of time.
Yeah, I think
we're around 15 minutes. So, all right. So one of the things that I want to do, and this is a curveball because I know you guys aren't ready for this, but I want to share at the end of every single episode maybe just a verse that comes to mind, or that we've been, or maybe reading over or something like that. Kind of like what you would do in a D group, and kind of have a little segment at the end that's like a devotional moment. Do you have anything that comes to mind that you've lately? You don't have to, just the verse.
Yeah, I think if we were talking about, if we were talking about this topic, there's obviously a bunch that we could.
It can be anything you want.
But I think for me, I think the verse that I would think about would be, I've already said it, but Luke 18 with a rich young ruler. When he says that what is impossible with man is possible with God, and what I love about that chapter, and this is something that I've been looking at over and over again, is the two stories that are put back to back. One is the rich young ruler, and then right after that is Zacchaeus. Yeah. And what is amazing to me is how Jesus says, hey, this is impossible with man, but then says, but it's possible with God. And then right after he makes that statement, he shows how it's possible with God. And he goes walking down the road, and he calls out Zacchaeus by name. And he doesn't say, if you want me to, I'll come to your house. He doesn't give him the option. He says, Zacchaeus, come down from that tree, because I must come to your house today. And so I for me, that is so important when we're talking about this, is that the understanding that we're a sinner, but then just seeing the grace of God, how he comes to us and he calls us by name, and he shows us. He doesn't just say it's impossible with man and it's possible with God, but just right after that he shows us how it is.
Right on.
What about you?
So, a verse just that we've been studying, not pertaining to our conversation. It all loops together. It all ties together. It's fluid. But for me, in 1 Samuel, in reading in chapter 8, when Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. And as you read the first 3 verses, and then down in verse 5, what happens is he takes his sons who are not ready to be handed all this responsibility and wealth, and it actually says that they turned aside after gain, once they received things. For me personally, as a father, and then also in training these guys, they know suffering. And we counsel through suffering. We counsel through all of the pain and the hurt and the sorrow and even their own wickedness and the things that they've done and forgiveness. And they know how to handle all of the adversity. But what happened was Samuel loses the faith of his people because he did not train his sons in prosperity. He trained them to handle adversity. And here it says, "Behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Give us another judge." We don't trust your judgment because you didn't train. You can't train your people. How are you going to train us? And so here, something for us that's been challenging me is I'm training people to handle all the adversity that comes. And every time they sit in my office, I'm showing them, here's what God says, and He is sovereign. But what are we doing with prosperity? And when they do get a house, when they do have a job, when they do have a spouse, whatever it is, kids, when their court fees are all paid and everything's back to normal, can they handle that? We've taught them to stand when it's bad, and so now it's a challenge for us to help them to stand when things are good.
Nice.
So 1 Samuel really speaks to that.
Cool.
By the way, I wanted to say you are the nicest dressed guy in this room right now.
I just look like a scrub compared to you.
It just dawned on me with the scarf.
Right. Some of us have to dress it up.
You're the nicest dressed guy in the mission. We need to get you a better chair.
I'm the nicest dressed guy in the homeless shelter. That's that says something.
All right. Okay. So thank you guys. This has been a lot of fun. Next time we will talk about some very interesting things. So we will encourage everybody to kind of check out the next video if this is going to be.
I'm excited about that one. I think we can really pull some things out. Just pull out the Bibles and really dig into that topic. That'd be good.
And so it's easy to learn more about the mission at downtownrescuemission.org. Learn about our recovery programs, see what we're doing every day on social media. DRM Huntsville, that's on pretty much every type of social media that you get. And as you go, just remember that God gave us arms to reach out and to reach up to Him and feet to move forward. And that's what hopefully we're doing here. Okay, this is Mission Hope Podcast. Tyler Jones, Kevin Mays, Adam Michael Casey. We'll see you next time. Bye. That was pretty good.
It's still Martin.
I know, I got you.